this event, and we had some great people who put in time to contact the speakers to think about engaging topics and speakers who would be of interest to the group. So Nancy Beaumont from South Dakota Foundation for Medical Care is hiding here in front very graciously. I saw Mark East from the South Dakota Medical Association, and then Angie Bakey from SDAHO, as well as a lot of folks at Health Point and Health Link. So let's give all those people a hand. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Dan, and I'll stop drumming my fingers.
I'd like to give a special thank you to Nancy and her group, the Foundation for Medical Care. They're sponsoring Regina's presentation. And for those of you who don't know Regina Holliday, she's an artist, she's a speaker, and she's an author. She's on a quest to really keep the patient at the center of all policy discussions when you talk about health IT. She's a phenomenal speaker, as you'll find out in a few minutes. She started this quest when her husband went through a period where 11 weeks in 5 different hospitals, and she was by his side trying to get the information they needed. And that really has had a profound effect on her life, and I believe she'll tell you that. So she started a number of advocacy movements, all centered around patients. And she does some phenomenal work. Her latest book is The Walking Wall, From 73 Cents to the Walking Gallery. You'll see her throughout the day. She'll be painting in the back of the room. And if you can see her, she's off to her right now. This is what is considered her walking wall gallery, and she has folks across the country in all walks of life, patients, providers, folks at the federal level of IT, all wearing those jackets, and it really makes a personal statement for her. So she's been in a number of peer-reviewed journals and other activities. A phenomenal person. Let's give a big South Dakota welcome to Regina Holliday.
It's so good to be here. Now let's see if power comes. Yay! That's always a wonderful moment. Oh my. It's a wake-up call, isn't it? Well, this is my third time in South Dakota. I am so excited to be here again. I saw that the airport now has fixed a lot of the construction it was working on a few weeks ago. So it's good to be back. What I do is I go around the nation, just as you heard, talking about what is going on in patients' rights, especially as it focuses on health information technology, data access and rights. And one of my favorite quotes is right here. It's from Alexander Pope, that it's, "Who sees with equal eyes God all, a hero perish or sparrow fall, atoms or systems into ruin hurled, and now a bubble burst, and now a world." You see, as people in the care setting, in hospitals, ambulatory clinics, doctors' offices, when you work with patients, you work a day in their life, maybe an hour, maybe only 20 minutes in their life. And it's a bubble. It's a moment. There may be 30 more people you're going to deal with to events like this, and I set up in the back, I set up off the side of the stage, and I paint what you say, and I paint what you paint. This painting here, this is a painting from the Learning Health Systems Summit in Washington, D.C. And I don't know if you've heard of that organization and what they're doing. It's pretty amazing. It's a public-private partnership using a chaotic apple, A. This is a symbol for apple. No, 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 it's a sound. And I would drive the teachers crazy, and I couldn't understand what they were talking about. So eventually, I just drew all the time. And you know, if you draw all the time in classroom, you're supposed to write, read, spell, they send you to the principal's office. Well, when I got sent to the principal's office, the principal often wasn't there. So what the secretary would do is she'd hand me crayons and paper, and I could draw. And I drew and drew and drew. And I was really struggling with school. And by the end of my first year in first grade, my teacher gave me a piece of paper with a picture of a bee on it and handed it to me with some writing. And I brought it home to my mom and said, Mom, my teacher gave me this, what does it say? And she looked at me and said, well, it says you'll be back. I would have to repeat first grade. And when I had to repeat first grade, it was really hard because I lost my friends. And so I was in the playground by myself, and there was this big brick wall on the playground. And what I would do is I'd pick up little pieces of chalk and shale and sandstone. This was Oklahoma and all that would be on the ground. And I would draw on the wall. I would spend my entire recess drawing on the wall. And I'd listen to teachers, and I'd listen to lessons, and I'd listen. They couldn't write, but I could draw. And that's how I spent my childhood. They would be spelling words like encyclopedia, and I would spell cat and sat. And you know what she'd do? She'd give me an A. She'd give me a bright red A right on top of the paper and said, you did a great job. And all year long,